Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is nutrition, and we're going to discuss nutrition concepts for endurance athletes. So we've done kind of this nutrition concepts for concept. I just said concept too many times. For I think strength athletes and aesthetic athletes, and this one is for endurance. So the rules of nutrition don't really change depending on whatever your goal is. It's just sometimes the focus for each rule is slightly different. So that's what we're going to discuss. So the general rules of nutrition and how do you make a healthy diet, whether it's for building muscle, fat loss, strength gains, endurance in this case. We talked about in podcast number 41 called Diet Right, What Matters Most. The most important component is calories. That's more important than anything else. So whether something's organic or not, or gluten-free or not, all that stuff, calories is the most important, the most impactful thing. So if you eat everything organic, but you eat like a jackass, you're still going to be overweight and not performing well. So calories is the most important thing. And in podcast 153, we discuss how many calories do you need. And then the second most important thing is protein intake. And in podcast 33, we discuss how much protein do you need. And protein is very, very important for kind of repair and maintenance of the body. It also helps to ensure that we have kind of peak kind of water retention and body composition. So sometimes when people eat not enough protein and too many carbohydrates, they can feel watery and fluffy and just not look their best. And it doesn't have anything to do with the calories, it's just the distribution of the calories that they're eating. The third most important thing is meal timing. Okay, in podcast 249, we discuss meal timing. And that goes into like when you should eat before activity, after activity, should you have carbs, should you have fats, all that kind of stuff. And then the fourth most important thing is macronutrient quality. So are you eating the best types of proteins? Are you eating the best types of carbs, the best type of fats? So for those, we do our types of protein podcast is 216. Our carbohydrate podcast is 21. And our fat podcast is 29. So those are the four most important components. Now, are all of those important? Yes, they absolutely are. So you should address all four. What I am more so saying is you shouldn't address them out of order, in the sense of what most people make the mistake of is when they try to think to eat healthy, they'll think of switching like the quality of the food. So like from a white bread to a wheat bread, or white pasta to a wheat pasta. They'll make the quality of the food different, but they don't really pay attention to whether that changes their calories. They don't really pay attention to protein, and they don't pay attention to their meal timing. And if you were to pay attention to the first three, calories, protein, and meal timing, actually the quality of your nutrients still really don't matter much in terms of results. They definitely matter in terms of like how you feel. So if you're just eating sugar all day, you're going to have, like peaks and drops in energy, and you have tons of cravings, and you're just not going to feel very good. But your overall results will actually probably still be on track. You're just going to feel like crap while you're doing it. So macronutrient quality is important, but it's not the be-all, end-all. It's not where you should start, okay? So, whether you're an endurance athlete, strength athlete, aesthetic athlete, those are the rules. Those are the things we want to focus on, and in that order, so that way you get the most bang for your buck in terms of energy. So you can go check out those podcasts if you want to learn more about the individual categories. So what we're going to do here is the first thing I want to look at is calories, because it makes sense, because it's the most important. And we're going to talk about what are our calorie concerns as a endurance athlete, or as an endurance athlete. So let's go through it. Okay, the need to maintain proper amount of calories is absolutely important to prevent muscle wasting and joint damage. So if you're an endurance-based athlete, meaning you do a lot of running, a lot of cycling, a lot of swimming, and that is the bulk of your training, okay? Is not really resistance training with weights. If you do resistance training, it's probably going to be like once a week at most, and you're probably more likely to focus on body weight resistance rather than externally weighted resistance. That's not actually right, by the way. You should do externally resisted training, but that's what you're going to mostly focus on is your endurance activities, okay? It's really, really freaking important that you make sure you eat enough calories, so that way over time you don't lose unnecessary amounts of muscle, and you don't have accumulating joint stress. So it is true that if you're an endurance athlete, if you have unnecessary body weight, that will impair your performance and it'll just make things harder for you. So there isn't a need for you to have an abnormal amount of muscle, but you still want to have enough muscle so you can move yourself around well and be strong. Okay, so the amount of muscle you have doesn't directly correlate to strength. So somebody can be super strong and not have a ton of muscle. So those aren't directly connected. However, if you do lose unnecessary amounts of muscle, you will lose unnecessary amounts of strength. Okay, so the endurance athletes that I've worked with, that we've done resistance training, and I've also just done pure nutrition where we did no training whatsoever, just helped them with their food. The like the ones who lifted weights and we did strength training, we got better results out of their endurance events whenever they had an appropriate degree of strength for their body size. Now, it's hard to kind of know exactly how much that is per person, per individual, blah, blah, blah. I can't really give you a calculation. But in general, they should be able to they should be able to squat their body weight on a barbell. So if they weigh 120 pounds, they should be able to put 120 pounds on a barbell and squat it. Okay? That's going to be a pretty good indicator. For deadlift, we should do at least their body weight, if not like body weight and a half. And then for overhead pressing and stuff like bench press is pretty much useless for most endurance athletes. So we would focus more on pull-ups and overhead pressing because that's going to be the plane of motion you'd more likely use in endurance style events like swimming, for example, is everything's going to be kind of overhead. So we would do overhead pressing and pull-ups and pull-downs as their strength for the upper body rather than what you'd see as like the bro science of like chest pressing and stuff like that. Now, they can still bench press, there's nothing wrong with it, but we wouldn't try overly hard to pursue strength in bench pressing. Instead, we would rather focus more on overhead pressing and pull-ups. So, for example, in pull-ups, you should absolutely be able to do your own body weight, and we would love to be able to do our own body weight for like 5 to 10 reps, and then start adding more to your own body weight. So actually weighted pull-ups. Overhead pressing, again, this is kind of like general, but you should be able to overhead press at least half your body weight. If you can't, then that means you're probably insufficiently strong. So those are some numbers you want to think through. If you don't have those strength levels, you are probably underperforming. You could probably perform better at your endurance activity, which is probably going to seem like it has nothing to do with strength, but you're going to perform better at your endurance activity if you have that level of strength. The reason why is moving your own body weight around won't feel very hard if you have those levels of strength. So you're going to get less wear and tear. You're going to feel less worn out just moving your own ass around. Okay? So having that strength level is very important, not only to prevent muscle wasting, but also to protect your joints. So overwhelmingly, one of the biggest issues endurance athletes run into is they undereat and they get these small little acute annoyances that turn into like, damn, that thing's not going away, which turns into me adapting my movement pattern around that injury. And then you're screwed because you're going to cause other injuries. So if I have a little tweak in my knee all the time and I start changing my gait in the way I run, like the pressure through my foot or my like stride length, I'm going to start causing issues up in my hip, up into my lower back, and it's going to start kind of cascading around and not be a good thing. So you want to try to make sure that you attack small things before they turn into chronic things, which then turn into adaptive movement behaviors. So that is not good, okay? And part of us making sure we don't get the small things that turn into the big things is making sure you eat enough so that way in between your activities. So when you're active, you're actually tearing your body apart. You're causing damage to your body. Then when you eat and sleep and rest, your body will fix itself, repair, and hopefully compensate and actually come back stronger and quicker and all those good improvements that we want. So the next time you go to be active, your body's ready for it. If you're active chronically too frequently compared to your nutrition, you will not recover well enough or fully in between your sessions of activity, and that's when small things start creeping up and then small things turn into big things. So it is very, very, very important to maintain an adequate calorie amount to make sure you can maintain proper strength, not only for performance, but to protect your joints. Okay? Now, the next thing we see people make mistake-wise in endurance athletes is they need to maintain a proper caloric amount for performance. Like we said, we just talked about performance in regards to like muscle mass and like moving yourself around. But since endurance is also mostly pain tolerance, so anytime you're doing an endurance activity, you just feel like shit the entire time, and you just have to accept that you're going to feel like shit. So that is what endurance athletes experience, is just miserable pain the entire time they're doing it. And it's kind of discomfort, like I am being a little bit of a jokester here. But it's uncomfortable to do endurance activities. The problem then becomes is endurance athletes have a hard time telling what types or what level of discomfort is appropriate. And what I mean by this is they can be underfed, and that can just make them perform not well and make them feel not good while they do their event. But they're used to not feeling good when they do their event. So it's hard to know, do I feel like shit today because I'm running, 6 miles, or because I'm running 6 miles undernourished. That becomes very hard to determine. And overwhelmingly, the mistake I see people make is they just get used to the misery of their event, and they don't recognize that if they ate more, they could actually perform better and feel better. They're not going to get rid of all misery because, like we said, endurance activities are misery, but they can feel better. Okay? So what you'll see is they become numb to the misery of being malnourished, and then they're unaware that they are. So whenever they come and see somebody like me and I tell them like, holy shit, you're eating half the food you should really eat, they're like, well, I feel fine. I'm like, no, you don't. You just feel normal. Like, you've defined normal as feeling like shit. Let's get you more food so you actually feel better. So they don't realize that they can feel better. Now, I'm going to talk about here in a second about how some people use endurance activities as a dysfunctional form of eating disorder. Okay? And they can also use it as a dysfunctional form of emotional kind of control, to where you will beat the shit out of yourself as a form of self-punishment. Okay? So when you try to get those people to fix their food so they feel better, they feel almost like it's a counter to the self-punishment that they want to get from the event. Now, I am not a psychologist, but you see this all the time. Okay, is people who have previously been overweight or they've been abused, they'll go into self-punishment behaviors because that way they can kind of almost control the misery they feel because they're choosing to do it to themselves rather than giving that power to someone or something else. Now, I'll talk about that here in a second. But going back to kind of making sure we eat enough for our performance is if you've reached a plateau in your performance, okay, and you've made sure that your training was good, it's appropriate for what you know it to be. You are paying attention to recovery methods like massages, icing your joints, other odds and ends people will do. And then you're also kind of, you've paid attention to everything of what you think you can pay attention to, but your performance has plateaued. Often what that is going to be a sign of is undernourished. So if you get those people eating a little bit better, all of a sudden they can train a little bit better and they get improvements. So I've met a ton of endurance athletes who their training was stupidly, ridiculously precise. They had freaking like Excel charts on every damn thing they ever did. Their recovery was very well thought out. So they had a sleep ritual. They had a certain amount of time they'd sleep. They'd get up in the morning and do blood flow workouts to get blood into the joints. They'd do yoga. They do like icing after certain events. There was a ton of thought process put into that. But then when you look at their food was ridiculous. Like not even remotely freaking close to being correct. But that's what they knew. So they knew a lot about the training. They've learned a lot about the recovery. They listened to someone or something about food, but good God, were they not even close to being correct. So we've looked at it, said, hey, you're severely under eating. Try doing this, this, and this, and all of a sudden they perform way better. So too often people with endurance sports, they undereat to control body weight. And they're completely underestimating how many calories they actually burn. So, like I've met a lady who ran, she ran 100-mile races. Okay, that's stupid. I've never even run 100 miles in my entire life, and she ran races that way. And I believe she weighed around 110 pounds, and she only ate about 1,000 to 1,200 calories a day. That is ridiculous. And she wondered why she was in and out of the hospital, always feeling sick. The knees were hurting, ankles were hurting, and she just kept wearing it as a badge of honor. That's what we do. That's how tough we are. That's how stupid you are. That is not being tough. Why the hell would you tear your body to pieces? Like allow that to happen. So you got to take care of your body. It's a fun, functional thing that's allowing you to do this awesome activity. Don't beat the shit out of it. Okay? So, those are the big concerns for food, is making sure we have enough calories to prevent unnecessary muscle wasting, to prevent joint stress, okay, accumulating into adaptive movements, and we also have to make sure we have our performance accounted for. So if you're plateauing, it can very likely be to being undernourished. Now, going back to the emotional, mental issues. So, a lot of people use endurance events, like we said, as a form of self-punishment. So they may have had a history of anorexia or bulimia. I was anorexic, by the way, for 2.5 years. So I don't mean to be speaking harshly or as if I can't relate. I can relate. I was anorexic for 2.5 years. I ate maybe 500 to 600 calories a day. I made sure I burned at least that much back off because I didn't understand that there was a basal metabolic rate, like how many calories you burn just being alive. So I would make sure that my activity level and my food activity, like my food, were zero at the end of the day, not knowing that I was probably burning, how many, like 1,600 calories just being alive. So I was in an enormous deficit and really lost a ton of weight and was very skinny and had some health issues related to that. So I can personally tell you that I do understand at least my variation or my version of an eating disorder. Okay. I've also worked with dozens and dozens, I don't even remember, like over 40, 50, 60 people who have clinical issues with eating disorder. So they went and saw a therapist. They got, threatened to be put into a, kind of like a recovery program. And they got into hold of me. We kind of worked together. And what we typically did was we used exercise as their form of controlling what they were trying to control through food. So we changed from nutrition abuse to almost exercise abuse. Of course, we don't want to view it as abuse. But if they messed up the night before and they overate, instead of not eating anything the next day, they would maybe go for a run, or they do a little bit of cardio, or they lift a little bit of weights. And we learned how to use nutrition and training to build their body to what they wanted it to be, rather than using it to tear themselves down and kind of cause self-abuse as a form of controlling external abuse. Okay, so I am aware of all these issues. However, just because you have those issues doesn't give you a green light to eat nothing and beat the shit out of your body. You're still going to run into all the complications, the health risks. You're not going to feel good. It's going to be a downward spiral reaction in your body, not a building thing. So by you controlling your emotions and mental state, by beating the shit out of yourself through endurance activity and under eating, that is not healthy. That will not lead to any positive place in your life. You need to attack those mental and emotional issues with a therapist, with a counselor. You need to go get help. Okay? So if you're using endurance activities and under eating as a form of emotional control, you need to find a different way. It will put you in a hospital. It'll make you have a very, very miserable life later in life when your joints are worn out and your body's feeling like crap and you're not moving well. Okay? So it might be working in the temporary moment, but it absolutely will not be a long-term success. Okay? So I understand how hard that can be to hear and how scary it can be to go talk to somebody. But that's what their job is. That's why people who are counselors and therapists exist. That's what they have education on. And you are not alone. Okay? There are other people who've dealt with that. So you can find help through the experiences they've had and find strength through the experiences they've had. So go get healthier versions of help. Okay. So I wanted to mention that because that is something I come across quite often with endurance athletes, is that self-punishment system. Okay? So the biggest mistake that all endurance athletes are going to make is going to be under eating calories by far. Absolutely, 100% of the time, that is always what I see. So they undereat, and they focus on things like macronutrient quality instead of actual calories. So they're going to talk about all these amazing foods that they're eating, but they have no freaking clue how many calories they're eating. They don't pay enough attention or enough value on protein, and their meal timing is awful. They'll usually go do their activity without eating anything beforehand, and then they wonder why they get these chronic issues. Their performance sucks. It's because you're running a machine with no fuel in it. It's not going to go well. Okay, so the next thing we would look at once we looked at and accounted for calories, we want to go for protein. Okay, so protein is important because muscle wasting is related to insufficient overall calorie intake. So if you're losing muscle, that's actually more indication of not enough calories rather than enough protein. So, but protein is important because it's still involved in maintaining and repairing the body. So you need to have healthy amounts of protein to protect your joints. Okay, so if you have the adequate amount of calories, but you don't have enough protein, you are still going to run into joint stress. You're still going to run into some muscle wasting. Okay, so these kind of two go hand in hand. So if you want to protect your joints, you want to protect your muscle, we know calories are important, but so is protein. Okay, so in podcast 33, we discussed how much protein do you need, and the range that we typically use is 0.6 grams to 1 gram per pound of body weight, and it's related to like lean body weight. So if someone's 300 pounds, they don't need 300 grams of carbs. So it's lean body weight. If you're an endurance athlete, you're probably already lean. So you can just think of how much you weigh now. Okay, multiply that by 0.6, and that'll tell you the minimum amount of protein that you should have, and that's what I suggest everybody to aim for. So most endurance athletes will not be reaching that number already. So we would make that goal that they can work up to. Okay, so they want to eventually get to 0.6, and then if they add resistance training, so if they add strength training like squats, deadlifts, overhead presses, pull-ups, stuff like that, we typically increase their protein for the 24 hours after that training session to help them recover from that training session. So we move up to the range of 0.8 to 1 gram for 24 hours after the training session, and that'll help them recover extra from that extra work, the extra stress of the resistance training. Okay, so that's if you don't get enough protein, you will run into chronic issues, joint issues, underperformance. You'll look softer and pudgier than you really should. You're going to get more muscle wasting than you really needed to have. So skin's going to look loose, all that stuff. Okay, so protein is important. We're not going to beat it to death just because it is what it is. I don't have to try to convince you. It's just going to work. Okay, so get to 0.6 however you can. That's going to help a ton. Listen to podcast 33 for more details about that. Now, meal timing. Eating before the activity, okay, of whatever your training is, eating before that improves your performance. It helps to lessen the wear and tear on the joints, and it helps to lessen injury accumulation, and it helps to lessen muscle wasting. So you should not do your endurance activities on an empty stomach. Don't do that. You might say, oh, I don't feel good if I eat beforehand. Find a different way to eat. You're probably not eating in a way that matches your body type. Doesn't mean you can't eat at all. It just means don't eat that way. So you have to fuel a machine before you use a machine. That's common freaking sense. Okay? If I could somehow get my car to run without fuel, or without any oil, or without any protective mechanisms, that would destroy the engine, correct? Yes. So if you are out there doing your endurance activities without being properly fueled, you are destroying your engine. You might not notice it today. You might not notice it in the next 6 months. But in a year, 2 years, 5 years from now, you will feel the effects of that engine being torn down. Okay? So, podcast number 249 talks about meal timing. So go listen to that to learn more about why it's important to eat before you do activities. Okay? Now, if you don't want solid food, that's fine. Consume calories, liquid calories. Drink your sugars, drink your calories. However you got to do it, that's fine. If you notice that you're peeing too often, add sodium to your calories, to your liquid calories. Okay? So now water doesn't have calories in it. Okay, we're talking about calories. So drinks like Gatorade or things that have sugars in them. You can add sodium to that, and that'll help the sodium combined with the carbohydrate, the sugar, will form glycogen, which is energy that'll be stored in your muscle. Okay, and that'll give you energy to protect you and protect your muscles. It'll improve your performance. It does all the good stuff. Okay, so if you're trying to drink like water and you notice you're peeing so much, don't drink water. Drink something that has carbohydrates in it, sugars, and then add some sodium to that. So that way it doesn't run straight through you and you don't have to pee every 5 minutes. Okay, now it'll help you even more if you still run into urination issues to have solid food carbohydrates. Now, if you do your endurance activity in the morning, you might have to have your solid food as like a carb load meal the night before. So you might need to eat a meal high in sodium and carbs before you go to bed. So that way when you wake up, your muscles are full and ready to go. You drink a little bit more sugars and carbs before you go to top off the system, and then you're ready to go be active. Okay? So eating carbohydrates and sodium the night before can help you perform better in the morning and not need to stuff so many calories in your face in the morning before you go be active. Okay? So now carbs versus fats, which should you have? That's again explained in podcast 249. It depends on how close to your activity that you're eating. If you're eating within 2 or 3 hours before the activity, you probably won't have carbohydrates. Okay? If you're eating before that, you would want to have fats, but you still want to probably eat closer to your workout as well, okay, your activity as well. So I might have a fat and protein meal, 5 or 6 hours before my activity, but then an hour or two beforehand, I might want to have a little bit of carbohydrates just to give me some topped off fuel, okay? So that's the idea. So podcast 249, we'll talk more about meal timing and if you should have carbs, what type of carbs, and if you should have fats, what type of fats, okay? Now, the last thing we want to look at there is macronutrient quality. So whether something's organic, whether it's a wheat product versus a white product, all those things, those are of very, 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 very little importance. Very little importance. And they really only matter if you take care of the first ones. If you take care of calories, protein, and meal timing, then your macronutrient quality, like the quality of the foods you eat, matters more. But you can't just pay attention to the quality of the foods you eat and then under-eat your calories, or not have any protein, or mistime all of your food. It's not going to make much of a difference. You're still going to feel like shit. You're still going to underperform. You're still going to get injuries. Things are still not going to go well. Just because you're eating something organic or not doesn't mean shit, really, unless you have all the other stuff in place first. So make sure you focus on the important, impactful things first, okay, before you think of macronutrient quality. So that's pretty much it. That's nutrition concepts for endurance athletes. I feel like I just yelled at you for an hour about calories, but that is typically the number one mistake endurance athletes will make is under eating their calories. And then also if they do eat enough calories, so if you're like, well, I'm an endurance athlete, but I'm soft and pudgy, then you're probably not having enough protein and you're mistiming your calories. You're probably not eating enough around your training, and then to compensate for that, you're eating way too damn much away from your training. So your body's storing fat. So you need to inverse that. So go listen to podcast 249 about meal timing. You can eat a shitload of food and stay lean if you eat at the right time. Okay? Cool. So if you're an endurance athlete, you might not think the owner of Brutal Iron Gym, that's a scary name, would be able to help you. But yes, I have helped very high level endurance athletes. Like I said, people have run 100-mile races, people did Ironmans, long distance swimmers. I've helped people who did different type of running events. So a whole bunch of stuff. Okay. So like I said, it's just the rules of nutrition applied to your needs. So if you would like help, we are happy to help. So if you have a specific question and you can't seem to get a good answer, shoot us the question, okay, in an email, brutalironGym@gmail.com. I'll get you the answer, okay? If you want any help creating an actual nutrition plan, of course, we'd help you with that. It would be a service, so you'd have to pay for it. But if you have any quick questions or if you just want to shoot some questions at me, I can answer what I can and then just tell you whatever else would be necessary to get like an actual training plan for. So I'll give you a good, run of like a 10 to 15 minute email, whatever I can answer. And then if you need more than that, maybe we could work together. But I don't want you to feel like it's only about money. It's absolutely not. So you do have the ability to get help if you would like help. Shoot us an email. I won't charge you for everything. Okay? And I'll give you the actual honest answer, not some bullshit answer that's still going to leave you screwed up. So, cool. Okay. So if you like this information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Brutal Iron Gym. Also, if you like the podcast, please share it with family and friends. The more people we help, the happier the world will be. And if you